Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. Claire, are you serious? Chloe, sitting across the table at the cafe, stared intently at her friend. I think we have an excellent reason to raise our glasses. Claire smiled slyly and picked up a wine glass filled with the amber drink. Claire had invited Chloe for lunch the previous evening. Chloe, known for her love of gossip and other people's stories, agreed without hesitation. And a reason indeed presented itself. Claire elegantly tossed back her dark hair, showing off new earrings. "Oh, I think I know what this is about," Chloe drawled with a knowing look. A new admirer, and from the looks of it, a very wealthy one. "You're very observant," Claire noted. The waiter placed the ordered dishes in front of the women and smiled politely. "Well, come on, tell me quickly, I'm dying of impatience," Chloe pleaded as soon as the waiter left. Claire chuckled softly. It was one of her favourite pastimes, keeping her friend in suspense, dispensing information in small doses. For a news enthusiast like Chloe, it was pure torture. "He's in the restaurant business. He's rich, attractive, generous, courteous, and drives the latest model Lexus," Claire rattled off in one breath. Chloe theatrically feigned a swoon and slumped dramatically in her chair. Then she snapped back to attention and looked at her friend with rapture. "Wow, what a catch! And how long have you two been, you know?" She leaned forward, ready to listen avidly. "About a week, and we met, you won't believe it, in a flower shop." Claire took a sip from her glass. "I went in there to choose flowers for an event and came out with a bouquet of white roses for myself." "That's just amazing," Chloe couldn't stop admiring. "At least show me a picture of this oligarch." Claire rummaged in her handbag for her phone. A few taps on the screen, and soon the friends were examining a photo of the man. "The suit fits perfectly," Chloe stated authoritatively. "You can tell he doesn't have some Betty from the salon doing his hair. Fit. He's not a man, he's a dream." Chloe sighed enviously, propping her cheek on her hand. She hadn't had anyone herself for 6 months, and her last suitor didn't come close to possessing such a list of virtues. Suddenly, a long-forgotten thought flickered in her eyes. Chloe straightened up and, tilting her head shrewdly, looked at Claire. "But we both know there's always some flaw, even a small one, right?" The women had learned long ago, no matter how perfect a man seemed at first glance, a flaw would inevitably be discovered. It was an unwritten rule. A handsome biker turned out to be a philanderer, a rich businessman, a heavy drinker, a charismatic boss, a bore and a miser. The rule worked flawlessly. "There is a flaw," Claire admitted with a sigh. "He's married." "Oh, pfft!" Chloe waved her hand dismissively. "That's nothing." The friends giggled, and the quiet clinking of glasses echoed through the cafe. "Women have never stopped us," Claire agreed, nodding. "Especially since his wife is a horror." The girl made a theatrical grimace, expressing contempt for the presumably unknown rival. "No manicure, no styling, sits at home, overweight. In short, some kind of frump." "Even so," the gossipy friend exclaimed in surprise. "Let's investigate." Claire ran a finger with bright red nail polish across her smartphone screen, and soon a photo of a woman clearly over 40, with a simple haircut, in a plain business suit and blouse, appeared before both women's eyes. "Is she a teacher or an accountant?" Chloe giggled. "Seriously, such a handsome man is married to this mistake? Are you sure?" "I'm sure, and it's for the best." Claire blew her bangs out of her eyes. Look at me and her, at her and me. It's obvious to anyone who a normal man would rather be with. Chloe surveyed her friend with a critical eye. It's not even interesting to steal a husband from someone like that, Claire yawned. She also looks about 7 years older than him. He probably married her as a grey mouse for appearances, and she's happy to sit at home and forgive him everything. I can see through women like that. They're ready to wait as long as he just comes home to sleep, right? Chloe drawled, finishing her wine. But you're going to arrange things so he doesn't even come home to sleep in the end? How will the poor grey mouse survive that? The gossips burst into laughter. His fingers enjoyed the smooth leather of the steering wheel. An expensive scent hung in the car's interior. And even though the car belonged to his wife, that was only on paper. Ladies wouldn't rummage through the glove compartment checking the registration, would they? For them, the mere fact that George was driving a premium foreign car was enough. His phone rang. George glanced at the display. Martha was calling. He pressed the button on the steering wheel, and his wife's voice came through the speakers. Georgie, today is Chef Helen's 50th birthday at the restaurant on Kromskaya. Please buy her a bouquet and congratulate her from both of us, Martha said quickly and clearly. All right, he replied curtly and ended the call. George didn't love his wife. He was embarrassed by her and tried not to appear anywhere with her except for rare family events. He treated Martha like a long-time, good, but completely unattractive friend. Martha was older, preferred calm, comfortable clothes made of natural fabrics, wore modest makeup, and never dyed her hair. However, she possessed a sharp mind, and by the age of 30 had become a successful businesswoman. They met when 20-year-old George, who had just arrived from the provinces, came to apply for an administrator position at her newly opened restaurant. It was then that he realized that by attaching himself to Martha, he could make a great life for himself, which he did with brilliant success, becoming first the executive director of her chain and then the owner's husband. Only after a few years did his true nature begin to assert itself. George was lucky. Nature had endowed him with the best in terms of appearance: broad shoulders, a strong jawline, tall stature, a dazzling smile. Without female attention next to his plain wife, he began to wither and decided he shouldn't deny himself the pleasure of spending time with young, long-legged, attractive beauties. His infatuations changed from time to time, and George never took any of his paramours seriously. He carefully hid his affairs from his wife and successfully exploited her work, money, and position. And George was utterly unconcerned with what anyone thought about it. The main thing was that Martha remained calm. 7 years passed like this. A flower shop appeared up the street. Deciding not to put things off, Georgie turned on his signal and pulled into the nearest parking lot. He figured a simple bouquet of 30 carnations would be sufficient for the chef. The shop door jingled, hitting the very Asian wind chimes that make a pleasant sound. Inside, besides the florist, there was another customer. She was meticulously examining expensive orchids and large white roses. And Georgie was looking at the girl with too much interest, forgetting for a few moments why he had come in at all. The florist's voice pulled him out of his reverie. "Young man, can I help you?" "Ah, yes, I need a bouquet for a 50th birthday for a woman." George quickly composed himself, not losing sight of the attractive customer. "Relative? Mother?" the florist clarified. "No, a colleague. Nothing extravagant. A formal congratulation," Georgie replied dryly and nodded towards the purple chrysanthemums. The florist sighed for some reason and began wrapping the flowers. Slender, petite brunette, long hair, blue eyes. Too beautiful to miss. He would regret it later. Georgie pictured a pleasant scene for a moment, and warmth spread through his chest. "These are the best roses, the white angel variety," he said, stopping behind the girl. "You only give these to loved ones." The stranger turned around, and her gaze swept over Georgie's business suit and the car keys in his hand. This always worked. In the modern world, there are so many women craving male attractiveness that whoever possesses it has the widest possible choice. "You know about flowers?" the girl asked, coquettishly adjusting her hair. "I know who they should be given to," George smiled dazzlingly. "Oh?" the girl raised an eyebrow. "And what flowers would you give me?" Georgie realized he was dealing with a girl with character. His excitement grew even stronger. He smiled again and turned to the florist, who was just finishing wrapping the chrysanthemums. "Please, also 21 white roses from the ones the young lady was choosing." He readily took out his wallet from the inside pocket of his jacket. Under the stranger's astonished gaze, they walked out together with the 30 carnations. An unexpected companion with a bouquet of white roses. "Do you give bouquets like this to all the girls you meet?" she asked with a smile. "No," the man put away his wallet. "You're the first." The girl blushed, flattered. "And I hope you won't refuse me dinner tonight?" George asked, following his prearranged script. "I won't refuse." She extended her hand to him. "Claire." Georgie kissed the offered hand, looking into her eyes. "George, Savignon Restaurant, 8 in the evening. I might be a little late. I think that's acceptable on a first date." George paused for a second, feigning thought. "See you tonight, Claire." "See you tonight, George." He went to the car, got behind the wheel, and started the engine. All this time he watched the girl. The suit, the car, and his charm worked flawlessly. Georgie winked at himself in the rearview mirror and drove out of the parking lot. By evening, the lady would be completely softened by her own fantasies and would agree to anything, although she was too beautiful to limit it to just one evening. It had been a while since he'd had a long-term affair. Who knew? Maybe it was time. He himself was wondering where to invite her. But then he decided to choose a restaurant a couple of streets away to avoid complicating his life with a long drive. Claire, as she had warned, was 20 minutes late, but she arrived in a skirt with such a slit that Georgie felt hot. Dinner quickly made it clear that they were both adults. "I want to say right away," Georgie swirled the glass of whiskey in his hand, "I'm married, but I don't love her. And anyway, it was more of a formality." Claire looked at him attentively, sipping her dry red wine. "You know, I'm not planning to settle down at home and do housework yet either." She ran her finger along the stem of the glass. "We both understand what we want from each other, and your wife doesn't bother me at all." George rarely heard this. Usually his paramours would start complaining, reproaching, sometimes even throwing tantrums with demands. He quickly let go of such women. A toy is a toy precisely because it doesn't tell the master what to do, but accepts his rules. Dinner ended at a hotel. Both got what they wanted. Georgie didn't stay the night, went home, promising to call in a couple of days. Left alone, she didn't regret what had happened at all. Moreover, she realized she had stumbled upon a big catch, and it was now maximally disadvantageous for her to show her character. She needed to be a sweet kitty for a while, and then he would start staying the night and divorce his wife. "Patience, Claire, patience," she told herself, looking at the shadow from the bedside lamp. "Handsome, smart, not poor. It's worth the effort here." Martha collapsed onto the living room sofa, exhausted. She had been on her feet since morning, visiting suppliers, looking for an error in the accounting, interviewing a new chef, ordering cutlery. When you own a chain of restaurants, there's almost no time for rest. Things come up every day. Martha understood this when she entered the catering industry. However, she loved her work with all her heart. She had trained as a chef herself, then quickly completed personnel management courses, worked for almost 9 years in an elite restaurant, and knew the industry inside out. And then, after selling her grandmother's apartment, she started her own business and met her future husband George that same year. The woman didn't hesitate for long, accepted the proposal, as there was no time to be picky about suitors. She had spent the years other girls spent on dates on building her business and working. George was handsome, and Martha was flattered that he had chosen her. Soon, her husband proved he also had a good business acumen, and Martha made him the manager of her chain of establishments. Malicious tongues whispered that George was a kept man, but the woman didn't believe it, or didn't want to believe it, or simply didn't have the time. Martha's mind was amazingly capable of planning, allocating, evaluating, and forecasting everything related to her business. But in matters of subtle romantic science, the woman was completely illiterate. By some miracle, Martha hadn't made her husband a co-owner of the chain, despite being charmed by his charisma. She glanced at the clock. It was just past 11. There was a rustling sound in the hallway. "You're late again today," Martha came out into the corridor, greeting her husband. "Yes," George nodded curtly, taking off his jacket. "Had problems with the new uniforms for the waiters. Took a long time to sort out." "Oh, that seamstress," Martha sighed. "Always letting us down." "Don't I know it?" George quickly pecked her on the cheek and went into the room to change. "Did you have dinner? I brought something back from Chef Helen's mini-banquet for her birthday." 10 minutes later, they sat down at the large table in the luxurious kitchen. Martha couldn't remember the last time she had cooked anything serious here herself. Usually, they had a quick breakfast, like coffee and waffles or scrambled eggs, ate lunch at work, and ordered dinner delivery. There were too many things to fit in a couple of hours of cooking. Although Martha loved the culinary craft and had once taught the head chef of her first restaurant how to properly braise meat and how to turn any tomatoes into Baku-style ones, a seasoned observer would immediately notice how Georgie's peacock tail dimmed next to Martha, how he suppressed with effort everything that shone so brightly with his numerous mistresses. His gaze turned grey, his movements quick but constrained, his smile politely forced. At first, Georgie tried to express himself next to his wife, but quickly realized she couldn't give him what other girls did. He adopted a different tactic, rarely being home, giving perfunctory gifts once a month, being polite and never arguing. "Maybe we could watch an episode of that series," Martha suggested. "Martha, I'd love to, but I'm dead on my feet. My eyes are already closing. I drove home by a miracle." George waved her off and simultaneously yawned dramatically, rubbing his eyelids. The woman sighed. She knew they had both been on their feet all day, but she hoped for a small miracle. After all, a woman's soul unconsciously craved romance, snuggling up next to her beloved husband, covering themselves with a blanket and falling asleep to a favourite movie. George rinsed his plate and went to shower. When Martha reached the bedroom, he was already asleep. The woman lay down beside him and hugged her husband. The pillow quickly carried her off to sleep too. "George, someone's asking for you in the dining area. A guest." The waitress Daisy peeked into the small office where Georgie handled all the restaurant's paperwork. "Is something wrong?" The man looked up from his laptop. "No, nothing. She said she's an acquaintance of yours." Daisy blushed for some reason. Very subtly and imperceptibly, but Georgie noticed. He always noticed how women fluttered when he paid them attention, especially young provincial girls. Georgie subconsciously assessed all female employees during interviews and, again subconsciously, only hired those he found attractive. He liked Daisy. It was pleasant to watch her work. "I'll be right down," the executive director of the restaurant replied after a pause. Georgie adjusted his jacket and went into the dining area. At a table for two by the window, Claire was seated in an armchair with the grace of a panther. She smiled radiantly at him and stood up in greeting. The man was pleasantly surprised and sat down opposite her. "How are you?" Claire took a sip of coffee with an innocent smile. "What are you doing here?" "I missed you," the girl replied, batting her eyelashes even more innocently. "It was easy to figure out which restaurant you managed from the photos on your account, so here I am." Georgie admired her with restraint, and then, quite unrestrainedly, surveyed his mistress. Claire definitely knew how to present herself to her advantage. Today she was wearing tight trousers, heels, and a bright fitted white blouse that emphasized her long dark hair. "Daisy, bring the guest a tiramisu on the house," Georgie instructed as he passed the waitress. "George, you're so generous," Daisy purred, simultaneously in a wheedling tone. Georgie unconsciously felt a surge of pride. Anyone who says only women like compliments is lying. It works both ways. "I thought I should invite you somewhere myself today," the girl continued, scooping foam from her coffee with a spoon. "Go on," Georgie placed his palm on the table. "There's a performance of Woe from Wit at the theatre tonight. I think a cultural evening wouldn't hurt after yesterday's fire." Claire smiled with the corner of her lips and raised an eyebrow expressively. "Only I'm afraid I don't have a suitable outfit for such a place. You—" He had been thinking of calling his mistress in the evening. And here was such initiative, as if she had read his mind. And Georgie liked initiative in beautiful girls. It smoothed over the fact that she was asking for a gift. The man smiled back at Claire mysteriously, took out his smartphone, made a couple of taps, and the sound of a bank notification about buying tickets was heard. "I've taken care of the tickets." He put his phone back in his inside pocket. "And you take care of the outfit." Claire leaned across the table and quickly pecked Georgie on the cheek. "And now I must take my leave. Work awaits." George stood up from the armchair. "See you tonight and enjoy your leisure, as we say." He winked at Claire goodbye and left. She waited until her lover disappeared, then quickly glanced at her smartphone screen, nodding to herself with satisfaction. Claire began to leisurely enjoy the dessert that had been brought. At the same time, she held her phone to her ear. "Were you doubting me? These trousers work wonders." "Uh-huh. We're going to the theatre today." "Of course," Chloe whispered. "Just passing through." Listening to guests' conversations was part of Daisy's routine work days. A month passed. If at first Georgie allowed himself to see his mistress only during breaks and on his days off, soon she consumed all his space and settled deep inside, where the man usually didn't let girls for entertainment. Claire changed, adjusting to his mood, but in any form she was invariably beautiful. She said what he wanted to hear, admired him, and this fueled his interest even more. Next to her, he was bright, charismatic, generous, gallant. Next to Martha, he was uniform, calm, blandly simple, with a businesslike expression on his face. They went to museums, exhibitions, various events together, even went to a country retreat once, and went shopping. "Looks like someone's in love." Chloe sprawled on the sofa in Claire's tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city. "And that someone isn't me," her friend chuckled. "Is it great with him?" "It would be great with anyone if they have money and looks. As usual, you don't talk much about yourself. You don't invite me home." Chloe took a candy from a vase on the shelf. I tell him what's necessary for now. Wedding organizer, I love Mediterranean cuisine, European culture, and quality clothes. He doesn't need to know about my rented apartment and my past relationships. Claire swung her leg, sitting on a chair nearby. The goal is to get him away from his wife, and then we can talk about other things. There, Claire, you know how to charm men, Chloe stretched. My ideal option is in the flower shop. Believe me, maybe yours is waiting for you in the sausage section of the grocery store. Chloe laughed. The girl remained silent. Well, come on, as usual, Chloe shrugged, chewing another candy. Let him take you on vacation or buy you an expensive ring. Vacation is a bit too soon, Claire shook her head. A little later when he's ready. Divorce him, darling. If you drag your feet like this, he'll never be ready. Chloe got up from the sofa and put her hands on her hips. You need to state your position. Let's at least get those shoes, remember? That fits. Claire looked at her friend slyly. Get ready, let's go try on shoes. That's the spirit. Chloe gave her a thumbs up and started looking for her handbag. Martha was reviewing documents, sitting in the car next to her husband. They had been rushing around the city on business together since morning. Traffic jams, calls, urgency. Martha could endure it all calmly. Experience had taught her. But George didn't like such fuss and got nervous, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. And he also complained about the increase in purchase prices last month. Meat prices have soared, especially beef. What have they come up with, raising prices in the middle of summer? Cows have plenty of food growing, Georgie grumbled. Vaccinations, grain, fuel, electricity, Martha listed calmly, without even looking up from her papers. If one thing grows, another grows. For now, we're managing, and we'll keep the dish prices. Guests are used to our conditions. We'll raise them if there's another 20-30% markup on meat. But we'll earn less, Georgie objected. We'll observe for now, the woman replied. Georgie didn't give up. Seafood has also jumped. Everything is getting more expensive. Maybe we shouldn't buy a new freezer instead of keeping prices the same. We need the freezer, Georgie, Martha objected. The old one broke twice, and the chef's preparations spoiled, costing a pretty penny. George was thinking where else he could find a flaw and how to cover his expenses. In reality, meat and seafood were indeed getting more expensive, but not as much as he described. Georgie understood that his beautiful mistress was costing him more and more, but he couldn't help himself. He wanted to be with her, to pamper her. George's phone buzzed, notifying him of a message in a messenger app. For some reason, Martha's eyes slid over the device. A notification hung on the screen. Photo. George picked up the smartphone and quickly looked at the received message, as quickly as he could, and with as calm a face as he could manage. But Martha still noticed his eyebrow twitch and how a shot of women's high-heeled shoes flashed in the reflection on the glass screen. An unpleasant, unfamiliar but very clear feeling scraped inside her. With an effort of will, Martha suppressed it, but the cold snake of suspicion had already slithered further down her back, sending freezing needles through her. Something important? The woman asked her husband casually. Someone's sending jokes in the work chat, Georgie replied, watching the traffic light at the turn carefully. Martha nodded somehow distractedly. Passed. They arrived at the restaurant to sort out work matters. Martha was bombarded with questions by the chefs, while George immediately escaped to the terrace to call someone. You're sending me photos at a slightly inconvenient time. He tried to make his voice sound confident, like he was trying to scold her playfully. I thought your wife didn't pry into your phone, Claire remarked softly on the phone. Stung by her softness, George quickly composed himself. No, my space belongs to me, but there are moments when awkward things happen. He leaned against the railing. Do you want to buy these shoes? They go so well with my new handbag, Claire drawled. It would be a huge loss not to get them. Besides, I'll look even more stunning next to you in them. Georgie swallowed, already picturing the shoes on his mistress's slender legs. Beauty, female magic, was doing its work. All right, I'll expect you in them tomorrow. Without hanging up, Georgie went into online banking and sent the required amount to Claire's card. Is that enough? Yes, of course, thank you, Kitty, the girl purred into the phone. Pleasure cost money, and whose money went to these whims was a secondary matter. Martha also came out onto the terrace, worn out by staff questions. Her head was buzzing with information, but outwardly the businesswoman remained as calm as ever. Georgie, I think we've been working so much lately, she approached her husband. Let's go out somewhere. Marth, I'd love to, you know, but I've already promised to go out of town with the guys. Nick bought a new car, wants to celebrate. Georgie shrugged nonchalantly. I know you don't like his company, so I didn't even invite you. Martha sighed. The excuse was flawless. She really didn't like Nick, her husband's friend. Well, if you're busy, she smiled thinly, I hope you all have a good time. Georgie smiled broadly, put his arm around her waist, and together they went back inside the restaurant. Dinners and breakfasts with her mother were a pleasant tradition for Martha. They had started long ago, and over the years had grown from scrambled eggs and cocoa in the home kitchen to full-fledged outings to the most beautiful and interesting establishments. In essence, it was her mother who instilled in Martha a love for the catering industry and played a significant role in who her daughter became. This time Martha chose an Italian bistro with small, cosy tables and checkered tablecloths for dinner. They often changed locations, but Martha never invited her mother to her own restaurants, considering it something of a bad omen. By the appointed time, her mother still hadn't arrived. Martha looked for the Mini Cooper but couldn't find it. Her mother, despite her age of 64, was a lively, energetic, and peculiar lady. She still had a youthful mischievousness about her. 10 minutes later, the waiter placed a teapot, cups, and cutlery in front of Martha. The phone rang. Martha, I'm so sorry, I won't be able to make it. Her mother's voice was filled with apologetic notes. The neighbour's dog is sick. She took it to the vet urgently and asked me to sit with her granddaughter. You wouldn't leave a small child unsupervised, would you? I'm sorry, dear, again. Well, if that's the case, there's nothing to be done, Martha sighed. Call Georgie, let him take my place, her mother suggested on the other end. I'll call him, the woman agreed curtly. Wish Bosinka and Mrs. Peterson well. Bye, Mum. Martha hung up. She wasn't exactly upset, but something close to it. It's like when you go to the store for one thing and end up buying something completely different or nothing at all. Originally, the evening was supposed to be spent with her husband, then her mother, and in the end, she was sitting alone at a table, waiting. The waiter placed a plate of pizza on the table and wished the guest a pleasant meal. It was too late to leave or refuse. Martha decided to enjoy her own company, looking out the window. Who would have thought that, being a successful businesswoman and a married woman, one could feel so lonely? Good evening. Excuse me for bothering you, but you look very much like my childhood friend, a vaguely familiar man suddenly said nearby. Martha turned around and saw that a man she vaguely recognized was talking to her. And you look very much like my childhood friend, Martha laughed, recognizing the guest. He raised his eyebrows but then also smiled. Martha, I haven't mistaken you, have I? May I sit down? Of course, Ethan. Wow, the man commented. How long has it been since we last saw each other? 20 years? More, since you were transferred to serve in the Far East? Martha clarified. And now I'm a retired police officer. Ethan folded his hands on the table. And I decided to move closer to my historical homeland. How are you? So many years have passed. Amazing. And the conversations and questions began, discussions and laughter. Martha had grown up with Ethan in the same yard. He was 2 years older than her. Throughout their childhood, they had climbed into other people's yards, built huts, baked potatoes in ashes, and dreamed of growing up quickly. At school, Martha studied diligently, while Ethan got into scrapes, matured, and went into the army by her graduation. Their bond was strong, and Martha was not to be offended, whether in the 1st grade or the 10th, otherwise Ethan would quickly twist the noses of her offenders. I studied there in Vladivostok, went to work for the police, became an investigator. I've seen everything during that time. Now I've come here and I'm thinking what a brave pensioner like me should do. Ethan finished his story cheerfully. It was written on your forehead that you'd wear a uniform. I'm not even surprised. Martha's mood noticeably improved. Meeting an old friend was that pleasant event, that spark of joy that was so necessary. And in that case you should either bake pies or make others bake them, Ethan replied in the same tone. Confess, you're in charge of someone, aren't you? Just 3 head chefs, 24 waiters, and a modest restaurant. Martha stirred her tea with a spoon. Wow! Ethan was genuinely amazed. So we both became who we wanted to be? It seems so, Martha agreed. What's wrong? Ethan noticed her distant look. Are you upset about something? Martha hesitated. She didn't want to complain about her vague suspicions, but the feeling of the icy snake hadn't left her since that moment in the car. In the end, the woman, choosing her words carefully, described the subject of her concern to her friend. Ethan furrowed his brow. An idea lit up his face. How about I keep an eye on your husband? I'm retired anyway, plenty of time. I can explore the city properly at the same time, he suggested completely casually. That doesn't feel right. Martha looked at the man with doubt. What if he realizes he's being followed? Ethan smiled broadly. Have you forgotten who I am? Surveillance and data collection were my professional duties for many years. And I must say, I performed them flawlessly. Ethan, you're growling, Martha hissed dryly, and then burst into laughter, inadvertently amusing Ethan. Everything will be done, comrade investigator. Can I just finish my dinner? She took the last slice of pizza from the plate. They chatted for a long time, ordered a second pot of tea, and then dessert. The planned dinner turned out to be completely unplanned. By the end of summer, Claire had grown accustomed to a comfortable and well-provided life alongside George. Like many girls from the provinces, she had come to the capital to study, but along the way she realized she had chosen the wrong profession. So, by diploma, Claire was a bank employee, but in reality she was involved in designing spaces for various events, mostly weddings. This occupation brought the girl not only good dividends, but also useful connections. Claire quickly began to see relationships as a way to climb the social ladder and get rich. She disdainfully threw fairy tales about love and paradise in a hut into her mental trash bin. Who needed this love when money decided everything in the city long ago? And she saw confirmation of this at the weddings she designed, where girls married wealthy, established, and educated men. Exceptions, of course, occurred, but they were rare. Claire believed that love would inevitably appear if your husband had a good income and respect, and his appearance played almost a secondary role here. But no matter how much her brain convinced her, the craving for beauty crept in from the depths. Why did Claire cling to George? She had hit the jackpot she had always secretly hoped for. She wasn't bothered by his wife or other aggravating circumstances. "Take everything you can," the girl would say. Like-minded people quickly appeared for this position. At one of the weddings, Claire met Chloe, one of the bridesmaids. The sharp-tongued, cheerful gossip appealed to Claire, and soon they started spending time together. Chloe had also come from the provinces and dreamed of getting ahead at someone else's expense. True, so far her advancement was limited to working in a mid-range boutique and living with her aunt. Over time, the girl had tidied herself up. But while Claire had managed to quickly root out her provincial nature, Chloe didn't succeed, and it occasionally showed through in her manners and conversation. This was precisely why only men who picked up on this were attracted to her, equally provincial thugs or conquerors of the capital living in dormitories. Chloe got angry. Claire laughed. She herself was luckier. As in any fishing, the big fish takes the bait less often than those who want to be like them. At 25, Claire already had experience in relationships with a government official, a bathhouse complex owner, a successful photographer, and a titled athlete. Only none of the relationships led to the coveted trap on her finger. The official was also married. The businessman, for some reason, said he would marry the girl his parents approved of. But Claire didn't get upset. During the relationships, she managed to extract everything useful from them for the future. "It's time to hint to your George about a joint vacation," Chloe drawled, yawning. "It's the velvet season now, the perfect time for trips to the sea." "Agreed," Claire nodded. "I was thinking about it myself." "What's there to think about? You're already covered in gifts." Chloe waved her hand theatrically towards her. "He gave you earrings, bought you shoes, ordered you a dress. You've already been to all the decent places. What are you waiting for? Throw Martha overboard." They were sitting on an elegant bench in the shade of spreading trees on the embankment. It was stuffy. Claire fanned herself with a promotional booklet she had hastily grabbed from a promoter. Chloe wanted to give more and better advice. Lately, she had been eagerly hanging on Claire's every word about her relationship with George, egging her on. "I'd demand the Maldives right away." "Do you think so?" Claire suppressed a hint of doubt in her question. "Of course, friend. You've been seeing each other for 2 months now. With his means, he should have figured it out himself by now. He drives a Lexus, but the thought of taking his lady on vacation hasn't crossed his mind." Chloe tapped her bent finger on her forehead. "You enlighten him or something." "Maybe you're right," Claire drawled. "I'm tired of it here. I want a change of scenery, to warm my bones, get a tan without a solarium, and my branded swimsuit is lying idle." "A friend wouldn't give bad advice," Claire immediately agreed. She suggested to George that they go on vacation together. It would be 7 to 10 days. They needed to come up with an excuse to present to his wife painlessly. And they also needed to figure out where to scrape up the extra money for this vacation. It was one thing to be absent from home in the evening, or give his mistress earrings, and another to slip away for a week's vacation, costing a couple of $100,000. Inside Georgie, 2 voices were fighting. One, adventurous, urged him to forget everything and give Claire the trip, and the second, meticulous, calculated the risks. "You should have divorced her and been taking girls around the world, not sitting under anyone's heel." The first thought grumbled. "Yeah, divorced and left to eat nothing but air. You should have told her long ago to put something in your name," the second one sneered. Ideally, George wanted to catch 2 birds with 1 stone, live comfortably without much effort, and meet a beautiful mistress while having a wife. But as the years passed, the role of the second became burdensome for Georgie. Although few people knew about it, Their formal, dry relationship with his wife was obvious to anyone who wasn't blind. "You can't divorce, Georgie," he muttered. "But no one else needs to know that. Right. But the vacation adventure will have to be cancelled and smoothed over with something." The man also remembered that in September, the restaurant he was responsible for had a lot of work and banquets planned. Flying away at such a moment was maximally risky. Martha might suspect something. But Georgie didn't want to quarrel with Claire either. "We'll find a compromise." George looked at his reflection in the glass door and smirked. "One that's advantageous for the initiator, of course." Martha strolled slowly through the restaurant hall, observing the fruit of her labour. The woman watched with tenderness and care, like a parent watching a growing child who brought home certificates, A's and medals from school. Martha was distracted from her pleasant contemplation by a phone call. "Hello, Martha, I have a full report on the work done." Ethan's voice was as casual as ever, but at the same time seemed to be trying to hide something. "Hello, Ethan," Martha's heart beat loudly under her shirt. "Do you want to discuss this now?" "I think so." Ethan sighed somewhat stiffly. "The information is interesting, if that's the word. I'm parked nearby, on the corner of the street." "Okay, I'll be right there." Martha hung up. An unpleasant pang tightened in her chest, and sweat broke out on her back. Why had she agreed to this adventure at all, knowing what might surface? Perhaps she didn't want to believe it, or she was afraid. It was ridiculous, given her position. Martha composed herself, clenched her hands into fists, exhaled, and pushed the door open to the street. She found Ethan in his car. He was thoughtfully examining something on his smartphone screen. When Martha got into the passenger seat, the man placed the device face down on his lap. "I won't keep you in suspense," Ethan began without ceremony. "I didn't observe George constantly, but what I managed to see and record over the course of a month was enough." Martha swallowed. Ethan picked up his smartphone and handed it to her, having turned on the screen beforehand. The photo that appeared showed George sitting in a cafe with a young brunette, not at all in a friendly manner, whispering something in her ear. "At the Bohemia Cafe," Ethan prompted. Martha raised her hand, tracing the screen with an icy finger. In the next shot, George was kissing the same girl in his car. The photo was taken through the windshield, but the professional hand of the former police officer had captured the shot so that there was no doubt about who was in it. There were a few more pictures after that, but they all eloquently spoke of the same thing. "So, a mistress," Martha stated in a harsh, unfamiliar voice. "Here it is, the truth I refuse to believe." "I'm sorry, Martha," Ethan brightened, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I tried to remain impartial in such moments, but I can't. You're not just another person filing a report." "Did you find out who she is?" Of course. Ethan opened a folder with other photos on his smartphone and began scrolling through them for Martha. Claire Miller, 25 years old, from out of town, works as a wedding decorator, and also a professional capital city huntress for wealthy men. Martha carefully examined the photos of her rival. Slender, long-haired, blue eyes, stylish clothes, her complete opposite, and very young. "How long has this been going on?" Martha asked, gathering her strength again. "From my observations, a little over 2 months," Ethan drawled. "The motive here is more than clear. She needs a rich man. He needs—" Ethan hesitated, carefully searching for words. "You don't need to be delicate," Martha finished the sentence. "He needs someone younger and prettier. Deep down, I've known for a long time that such a handsome man like Georgie couldn't be with me out of great love. I'm not stupid either, and I understand what attracted him initially, but I didn't stop loving him because of it, and I should have." The woman's lips trembled, her eyes stung, and the pain was felt through all the walls. Martha wiped away the tears that welled up with the back of her hand, sniffing. Ethan involuntarily began to comfort her. "Martha, your husband is a poser and almost a kept man. Don't you dare blame yourself for anything. Besides, that's not all I found out." "What?" Martha stared at him in astonishment. "What do you mean, not all?" Just like that. Ethan somehow conspiratorially furrowed his brows. "It seems both lovers are playing their own game and think no one suspects anything. Essentially, that's true. Only I burst out laughing when I realized what was going on." Martha looked at him in bewilderment. Instead of explaining, Ethan showed her something else on his smartphone. Martha carefully examined the picture. "I don't understand anything. Does he have two of them?" She furrowed her brow. "That's what I didn't get at first either." Ethan nodded. "It seems your husband wants to do everything everywhere at once." Ethan leaned towards her and began explaining something, counting on his fingers and drawing diagrams. And Martha laughed, absurdly, foolishly, and completely inappropriately, but she laughed. "What should I do in this situation?" she asked the former investigator after all the discussions. "Act as usual, unperturbed," Ethan said. "Let everything take its course, and I'll continue gathering information so you can do everything beautifully in the end. I hope, by the way, you're not thinking of forgiving him." "Out of the question," Martha shook her head categorically. "I've finally faced my fear, and now I don't intend to be dependent on it. This is my life. I'll send you all the photos, but don't start a showdown prematurely. He's a jerk, I understand, but the matter needs to be seen through to the end. You won't lose anything legally in a divorce, right? And he'll get almost nothing. So let's at least get him for the sake of justice." He hugged Martha warmly and lightly shook her. She composed herself, smiled, thanked her friend for his work, and got out of the car. "Why aren't we flying?" Claire pouted capriciously. George sat opposite her in a soft armchair on the terrace of a trendy bistro. Boats and ships sailed by on the river nearby, and the wind blew cool air from the water. "Understand, I can't just drop everything and fly away in September." Georgie showed her the restaurant's booking list for a month ahead. "I can't now, but I promise we'll revisit this issue in the future." I was already looking forward to the sea and sun. Claire continued to be capricious out of principle, although she perfectly understood the real reason for her lover's refusal to travel. His wife, and only his wife, prevented them from enjoying their vacation and each other. He could talk about being busy, about plans, but for the first time, her lover's wife genuinely annoyed Claire. Gifts and time were no longer enough. She wanted to be the sole owner. Chloe constantly egged her on. "Darling, you can only dream of a comfortable and secure life with someone else," her friend would say. "You need to free up your cozy armchair as soon as possible. I brought you something to sweeten the situation." George reached into his pocket. He placed a beautiful little box on the table and nodded invitingly, offering her to open it. Claire took the gift with interest and found a ring with a large transparent stone in the box. "Oh, is this an engagement ring?" She examined the jewellery, its facets catching the sunlight. "Let's say it is." George contemplated the girl's joy and delight at the gift. He liked this feeling. He fed off it. "So you're proposing to me?" She put the ring on the ring finger of her right hand. "Let's say so." George smiled mysteriously, folding his hands over his stomach. "But you're still married," Claire looked at him slyly. "I know, and I promise I'll resolve that issue," George replied evasively and at the same time confidently. It seemed Claire was quite satisfied with this answer, as she kept admiring the stone in the ring and had already sent several photos to her friend in their chat. Of course, it would have been foolish not to boast about such a gift. George understood that he couldn't postpone the moment forever. A divorce from Martha would be disadvantageous to him in every sense, so sooner or later the affair with Claire had to end, unless she eventually accepted the fact of his marriage. Claire pressed him gently but often, and Georgie understood why. Many of their plans were ruined because of Martha. Anyone would start to get annoyed. That same evening, Claire was walking home from her workout, her sports bag slung over her shoulder. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Chloe was relentlessly praising the ring and admiring George's impeccable taste. "Did he clearly tell you he'd divorce her?" she asked. "Almost," Claire confirmed. "Almost, friend, doesn't count," Chloe remarked. "Either it's a clear answer or he's still leading you on. No dates, no plan of action. What is this? Are you suggesting you brainwash him with this question every time you meet?" Chloe bent down to tie her shoelaces. "I suggest you go to his grey wife yourself and put a firm stop to their family story," Chloe stated emphatically. "Otherwise it'll be like with that politician. Let your Georgie get angry, but you need to nip it in the bud." "So nip it," Claire hummed doubtfully. She had never done that before, but she had replayed a similar scenario in her mind many times. "Yes, of course, nip it," Chloe confirmed heatedly. "There's no other way out here. Can we go together?" "No, he's my man. And who do I have to be afraid of there, Chloe?" Claire remembered George's plain legal wife. "An old grey mouse? Please. A couple of phrases will be enough to make her cry. I still don't understand what keeps them together at all. Beautiful people should be with equally beautiful people." "It's about time, friend," Chloe supported her. "Go and demand what's yours from someone who clearly got him by mistake." Finishing these loud speeches with mutual laughter, the girls said goodbye at Claire's doorstep. She quickly slipped into the shower in a combative mood and at the same time thinking about what to wear to appear before her lover's wife to further emphasize the difference between them. The doorbell rang, catching Martha after lunch. That day, she had decided to work from home and had been sitting at her laptop in the kitchen since morning. Georgie had left to prepare for a large banquet and wasn't expected back yet. Her mother hadn't warned her of a visit, nor was she expecting a courier. Martha put down her laptop and straightened up. Her back ached only when she put on comfortable trousers and a t-shirt from her loungewear set. The woman took a sip of her now cold tea as she walked and headed for the door. Through the peephole, standing outside and persistently pressing the doorbell button, was her husband's mistress. Martha blinked, not believing her eyes. Her mouth went dry. The woman looked carefully through the peephole again. Yes, it was true. The girl from the photos Ethan had given her was standing on the landing. Martha took a deep breath, then exhaled, and reached for the doorknob. A wild, childish thought flashed through her mind. Maybe pretend no one's home. But the woman quickly dismissed it. The latch clicked with a metallic sound. The door opened. Their gazes met. In those few seconds, an experienced observer would have read contempt, disdain, and disgust in one pair of eyes, and vague interest, confusion, and strange restraint in the other. "Hello, Martha. I won't beat around the bush and will say it straight." Claire looked Martha up and down with a gaze full of contempt. "Your husband and I love each other, that's a fact, and he doesn't love you, that's also a fact, so let him go nicely and give him a divorce." Martha overcame the initial wave of uncertainty and leaned her shoulder against the doorframe. She examined her rival. Claire was dressed to the nines and wore full makeup, clearly wanting to contrast, emphasizing her youth and vibrancy. As if Martha hadn't attended management courses. In her mind, the image of the mistress was replaced by the image of a pompous green chorus girl who had come to apply for a job. The substitution worked. "Hello, Claire. I'll agree with the second fact, as I've known it for a while now. But I would strongly dispute the first. My husband is capable of loving only himself," Martha said in a calm voice, looking Claire directly in the eyes. Surprise flickered in Claire's eyes. The grey mouse wife was not the one who was supposed to immediately back down before her, and she even knew her name from somewhere. "You're still not a match for him, and we both know that." Claire put her mask of confidence back on. "He's young, handsome, successful. He should be with a woman like him who will make him happy, give him a divorce." The moment for the jab in the nose Ethan had spoken of had arrived. "And who said I wouldn't give it?" she said, looking intently at her rival, who was clearly thrown off balance by this. "Take Georgie right now if you want. I'm even willing to let you into the apartment to pack his suitcases." Martha stepped back and waved her hand invitingly down the hallway. Claire hesitated. Something clicked in her head. "Just keep in mind that you won't get anything. The restaurant business is mine. This apartment was bought by me before the marriage, and even the car, which expensive George used to impress you, also belongs to me. No, if it's such great love, then I won't stand in your way. As they say, with your loved one, paradise is in a hut." Martha shrugged. "So be it. I'll let him keep his job as a waiter." Claire was stunned. The carefully planned scenario in her head collapsed like a house of cards. She recoiled. "Oh yes, I almost forgot." Martha took out her smartphone and showed Claire a photo. The picture showed a familiar car and all too familiar people. Georgie was kissing Chloe near her house. Claire froze, staring at Martha with a wild look, and began frantically pressing the elevator button. It was like a grasshopper trapped in a glass jar in the midday sun. All her confidence, mannerisms, feline grace vanished in an instant as soon as Claire realized what an idiotic position she was in. Finally, the elevator doors opened and the girl disappeared inside. Martha watched her go with triumph. Now she didn't have to pretend anymore. She could cast aside the beautiful and ungrateful toy. Let someone else have such happiness. And she, Martha, didn't need it for free. Only in the taxi did Claire fully realize how cleverly she had been tricked. One had carefully blinded her with someone else's wealth. The other had talked her into things and pushed her in the direction she herself wanted. Inside, she was seething. Even the taxi seemed too slow. She arrived at Chloe's house. She didn't know why she had come here, what she wanted to see or find out. Claire looked around. The painfully familiar car. The girl deliberately didn't ring the intercom and slipped into the building with one of the neighbours. She went up to the 3rd floor and again, like an hour ago, started pressing the doorbell button. A couple of minutes later, the door opened. A dishevelled Chloe stood on the threshold in a housecoat. "Where is he?" Claire pushed her aside and entered the apartment without ceremony, still wearing her shoes. "Are you drunk? Who?" Chloe twirled a finger by her temple. Instead of answering, Claire stared at her wildly and began having a tantrum. "Are you trying to make a clown out of me?" Claire reached an old-fashioned tall wardrobe in the room and flung open the doors. That quiet, tingling pause occurred. In the back of the room, among the clothes hangers, holding shoes and trousers, stood George, staring at the two former friends with the look of a Chinese nodding doll. "You traitor!" Claire grabbed his ear and dragged him into the room. George yelped, stumbled awkwardly backward, then straightened up, shielding his face from the blows his disgraced mistress rained down on him. The situation was worthy of a joke. A bad joke. Claire stared furiously first at her former suitor and then at her former friend. How? Why did you do this to me? And why do you always get everything? Chloe flared up suddenly and brightly. All the perks, all the handsome guys, all the best options. And I'm just like a little dog picking up scraps in the form of stories about your gifts and affairs. Learn to share, friend. Claire was speechless. The one she had trusted with all her secrets, all her ideas and mysteries, turned out to be a vile rat. And now I understand everything. Claire, her cheeks burning, slowly clapped her hands. You deliberately encouraged me to raise my demands, hoping George would think twice and dump such an expensive girl. And I, like an idiot, believed it out of a sense of my own importance. And you sent me to his wife so I would make a fool of myself, and then you would come in and take over. Sarcastic, Chloe remarked. Maybe I'm not as beautiful, but I know how to be a real person, not just wear expensive shoes and beg for another ring. Listen to problems, give advice, and you're like a plastic doll, soulless and all dolled up. Claire almost physically felt like she had been spat on. Without fully understanding what she was doing, she lunged at Chloe and delivered a resounding slap. The echo rang out even in the corners of the room. Chloe's head buzzed like an empty pot. In the commotion of the rivals' quarrel, they didn't even notice how the hero and instigator of the whole mess quietly slipped out of the apartment through the unlocked door. Without a word, they rushed to the window and only managed to see the rear bumper of the familiar Lexus. At home, George quickly tidied himself up and took a change of suit from the hanger in his study so that nothing would remind him of the humiliating situation Georgie had found himself in today. The adventurousness and danger that were inevitably present in the situation he had created excited Georgie. Chloe had messaged Georgie on social media and suggested meeting. Claire had shown her his profile so often that it wasn't difficult to remember and find the man later. Chloe didn't ask to be taken to expensive restaurants, didn't ask for gifts. But she really knew how to listen. The more Claire asked for, the more Georgie liked Chloe. And at some point he decided, why choose one when you can be with everyone at once? One for money, the second for cozy evenings, the third for going out and maintaining his status. Why not live like that? Georgie was driving home hoping to get some rest from the situation he had gotten himself into. But today wasn't over yet. Martha, I'm home early, the man said loudly, slamming the front door. Are you home? Home, Georgie, home, the woman replied. I'm so tired. He entered the room, rubbing his forehead deliberately. Tired of the agonizing choice of which of the two mistresses to prefer. Martha looked at her husband, sitting in the armchair. George looked as if he had been doused with ice water. He tried to say something, but only incoherent sounds came out. I know what you're tired of. Martha stood up and threw a pile of photos at his feet, where he was alternately with Claire and Chloe. Georgie stared blankly at the pictures scattered across the parquet floor. Did you think you were the smartest? Martha walked right up to her husband. And the proverb about the well is apparently unfamiliar to you. Georgie just stared at her silently, gradually realizing how he had screwed up. Out of the apartment by tomorrow, please. Martha turned away to the window. And by the way, I've already found a new manager. If the position of waiter suits you, you can stay. Otherwise, get lost. I don't need a traitor husband, a cheater, and a kept man. Martha, let's talk, George began, but his wife interrupted him. Get out right now, just leave the car keys here, otherwise I'll report it stolen. George realized he had played too much and outsmarted himself. The box of plenty turned out to be a trap he shouldn't have trifled with. Empty, humiliated by his own bad habits, Georgie shuffled off to pack his things. Excuses were pointless. He thought about staying with one of his mistresses, but realised Claire wouldn't forgive him, and Chloe didn't really need him that much. Rather, she just wanted to get back at her friend that way. Georgie felt used and worthless. Martha heard him leave the living room. She felt she had won. But first and foremost, she admitted to herself what she had been afraid of and had deliberately ignored. It was as if a dirty curtain had been pulled back from her consciousness and pure, bright light poured in. The first snow was falling on the city like a thin veil, covering sidewalks, roofs, trees, settling on fluffy coats and red noses, hiding in bushes, or landing on the tongues of curious children. Martha hurried towards it. She hadn't seen Ethan since September. He had rushed off to his elder sister's place near Murrom while she was recovering from a broken leg. And now, this morning, her old friend had messaged her and suggested meeting. Martha was brushing up on her driving skills. Although she knew how to drive, she preferred taking taxis or relying on her ex-husband's driving skills. But now, the woman was determined to steer her own life. Ethan had chosen some inconspicuous cafe for their meeting. A plump woman in an old bonnet was frying juicy chebureks behind the cashier in the open kitchen. "This place reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen." Martha looked around inside with interest when she and Ethan met and started talking. "That's why I chose it." The former investigator smiled, following her gaze. "Just like childhood, it's all atmospheric. I want something simple, understandable, warm, comforting and hot. A cheburek?" "Let's do it," Martha nodded in agreement. 10 minutes later, they were both devouring hot chebureks. They were steaming, spitting juice, but no one was bothered. Martha got her hands messy and couldn't remember the last time she felt so easy and good with someone. Even restaurant chain directors have the right to a little pleasure in the form of simple tea and good old chebureks. "The forests near Murrom, where my sister lives, are a fairy tale. Perfect for cross-country skiing on a winter morning." Ethan wiped his hands with a napkin. "I remember you loved to run like that when you were a kid." "There was more snow and colder winters when we were kids," Martha remarked. "But you're right, I'd love to escape here for a day into the forest." "So you're already agreeing to go?" Ethan asked soulfully. "I think the restaurants can manage without my supervision for a couple of days," Martha stretched. "And I need to practice driving not just in the city but on the highway too. Skills are only developed through practice." "We can go today. Why waste time, right?" Ethan winked at her. "Ethan," Martha chewed her lip, formulating her thought correctly. "Will this be a friendly trip based on warm memories, or a romantic journey with hope for something more?" Ethan smiled with the corners of his lips, and wrinkles gathered at the corners of his eyes. "That's for you to decide," the man replied. "Let it be the latter," she said after a pause. Ethan's hand covered her fingers on the table, tenderly, confidently, and at that moment Martha thought that another chapter was beginning in her life, but in a new book,